Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Macon Campbell and this is maconSTUFF. So I guess this will be my very first video for 2020. It feels almost like forever since the last time that I actually made a video. I've taken a nice long break, but I'm very excited to get back into it. My kids are all back at school, so everything is back to normal. And I guess we're just going to pick up right where we left off. So closing out 2019, I pretty much finished everything on the inside of the organ, everything from the bellows all the way up through the action and the keys. Everything is done and refurbished, and all that's left now is the case. There are obviously a couple more things that I'm still going to have to do to the action before I put everything back together, such as leveling the keys and straightening them all out nicely as a result of me not removing and storing all the pitmans in order. So what I'm going to do now is jump into the case. But before I do that, let me just give you a bit of an overview of how I'm going to go about it. First off, I'd just like to mention that I'm not going to do it the proper traditional way. What I basically mean by that is I'm not going to remove all of the finish with a stripper all the way down to the bare wood. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and add a bit more character to the case. So basically I'm just going to jump into sanding right from the start. I'm not going to aim to sand off all of the finish. I'm just aiming to smooth out everything. Then what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to stain it with this. This is basically an antique oak stain. The reason I'm going to do that is because I'd like to have a bit of a darker finish to the case when it's finished. I did happen to see the exact same model that I have on the Reed Organ Tech eBay page on Facebook, and that cabinet was a whole lot darker than what mine is, and I really liked how that looked, so I decided that I'm going to try and replicate that. Once that's done, I'm going to coat it with a polyurethane type finish. The one I have is in liquid form, which is actually meant to be applied with a brush, but I happen to have a portable Bosch spraying unit that I think I bought more than 2 years ago and I haven't used once. So I don't know how well that's going to go, as I've never done that before, but I think that spraying it is going to give me a much nicer finish. So at the moment the parts for the whole case are divided in two spots in my workshop. This right here is everything I removed from the top of the organ, that being everything pretty much above the keys. And the rest of the carcass is standing on the other side there, which housed the bellows and the whole action. Just a little something that I wanted to show you here quickly is that at some stage when someone else must have been working on this, they took it upon themselves to paint the whole back of the organ and the inside parts in black. This is a kind of matte black paint, and this is also on some of the inside parts of the carcass on the other side there. Pretty much everywhere except for where the bellows are at the bottom. So obviously whoever took this thing apart the last time didn't strip it that far. I don't know how I feel about that, and I'm also not sure if I'm going to sand all of this down back to a wood finish. Initially I'm just going to jump into sanding. I'll see how hard it is to remove this, because it is at the back and on the inside and mostly where people aren't going to see it. I'm not going to be too worried about that. If it comes off nicely, that's great. If it doesn't, then I'm just going to leave it like that and apply my clear coat of polyurethane straight over it. So the first thing I'm basically going to do is I'm going to pick out a relatively small piece, sand it down, stain it and spray it with my polyurethane just so I can get an idea of what it's going to look like, so that I can see if everything works the way I'm hoping it will. So let's jump into it. Okay, so I've decided I'm going to do my test on one of these pieces, as it's got normal finish on this side and it's got some of the black paint that I mentioned on the other side. So I'm going to sand this down, stain it and add some finish. But first I better remove these tiny little nails here, as I've already gotten stabbed by one of them. So let's get started. Okay, so as usual, I'm running into a whole lot of problems again. I'm really struggling to get the varnish off in all these ornate features. So I have no choice other than to go with a stripper. I have this paint stripper. It states that it can also be used for varnishes. So I'm going to give this a try. My only worry now is that from what I've just read, a stripper will basically just strip the varnish off the wood and it won't remove the stain. I'm a little worried now that sanding on this flat surface may have removed the varnish as well as any stain if there was. I'm not sure if there was any stain. If I look at the other side, the wood color seems to be fairly the same as it is here, so I'm hoping that there wasn't any stain on here initially. As I mentioned, I'm going to add stain when I'm finished. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to take both of these, this one that I've already started sanding and this one that is still fresh. I'm going to apply paint stripper to both of them, and once I've cleaned them off, I'm going to see if there's any difference in the color of the wood. That should give me an indication whether or not there was stain on here in the first place. Let me get me some gloves and a brush, and I'll apply some stripper. So I suspect I didn't put enough of the stripper on here. This one is only just barely clean now. I was surprised that there was still quite a lot of varnish that came off here even after I sanded it. So I'm going to add a bit more stripper to these grooves, as it seems like those haven't cleaned out as nicely. This one I'm going to cover completely in stripper, and I'm going to give it a much thicker layer, because after I read the instructions, it says that you have to put a fairly thick coat of it on there. So let me give that a try, see how it goes. Okay, so I removed all of this stripper off camera just to see if it's working according to plan. And I must say, I'm noticing that it is really hard to get all of this varnish off here. I don't know how many layers or how much varnish was actually on these things. This is the second coat that I've put on each of them, and there's still quite a lot of varnish on here. I pretty much used the scraper to scrape off most of the excess on the flat surfaces. I had a lot of difficulty with the grooves over here, so what I did is I got a fairly hard bristled plastic brush which I used to clean out whatever was still stuck in there. I noticed that there was some of the residue that was a bit more stubborn, so I got myself a couple of dowels here that I sharpened to different thicknesses just so that I can go in and clean these grooves a little bit better. These are the tools that I'm using now. I've got a different size for each groove, and they seem to be working fairly well, but I think I'm going to have to add another layer of this stuff on here. Now if I have to repeat this stripping step 3 times just to get all of the varnish off, then the rest of this organ is going to take me quite some time. Be that as it may, I'm going to clear out as much of this stuff as I can, and then I'm going to put another layer on here, and hopefully that's going to be enough to get this to a point where I can do a finished sanding pass and go ahead with my stain and my varnish. Now I will mention that this paint stripper states that it should be left for 10 to 20 minutes. I did leave the last coat on for over an hour because I had to go pick up my kids from school. So I don't know if that could be the reason why some of the stripper and the varnish is so stubborn. But I'll do this next coat and I'll leave it for 20 minutes exactly, and then I'll scrape it off and we'll see where we stand then. So I'm really liking this oak color, but now that it's had a bit of time to dry, it's gotten quite light again. I don't think I should have wiped away the excess, but I was worried that it was going to stain it too dark. But now that I see how much lighter it's getting now that it's dried, I think I'm going to add another coat, and this next coat I'm just going to leave to dry without wiping it down. Hopefully that'll get me a little bit closer to where I want to be. So let's do it. Well, that's just great. Nothing like the smell of fresh sewage in the morning. Guess I'll have to have that sorted out. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I like the way it turned out. I'm just going to run over it with a bit of Scotch-Brite and then we're going to move to finishing. Okay, so as I mentioned, I've never used this thing before. It's very dusty, but basically still brand new. This is what I'm going to be using. This is a plastic varnish. It says glass finish polyurethane. It does say if you want to spray it, you have to use an enamel thinner, which I did purchase, which is the one made specifically for this. Now it doesn't say on any one of these two cans the ratio to which you need to thin it down, but from what I've seen online, varnish is generally mixed 50-50. So that's what I'm going to do here. Luckily this paint or varnish container does have markings on the side, so I'm going to fill it up to the first mark with the varnish and then fill it up to the second mark with the thinners, and that should give me a 50-50 mix. I will most probably spray 1 or 2 pieces of scrap wood first just to make sure it's laying down the varnish nicely. So let's give it a try. Well, that didn't help. Let's hope the thinners goes a little smoother. That's much better. Why don't they do that for paint cans? So let me go spray a couple of pieces of scrap just to see if everything is working the way it should, and then we can move on to spraying our pieces. Okay, well that was pretty hair raising. It lays down a ton of finish. Let me show you. As you can see, it's terribly runny. Good thing I sprayed a piece of scrap first. I don't know exactly how I'm going to fix that. I might just have to put the pieces that I'm spraying a little bit further away. I've already got the spray gun set to 1, which is supposed to be the setting for the least amount of spray. I'm also spraying it on this setting. This is low pressure and this is high pressure. So I can't go any lower on my settings. The only other option is going to be to spray from a distance. I'm going to try one more piece of scrap and see how that goes, and then I guess we'll just jump right in. Okay, that seems to have worked quite a lot better on that little piece of MDF. So while I'm at it, I'm just going to jump in, grab those pieces, spray them. Okay guys, I'm going to call it for this episode. I got a bit of a late start this week, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to work on this. Besides, the plan anyway was to do a bit of experimenting first, just to come up with a game plan for the rest of the case. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic and say I think that I may just be able to pull this off. This turned out really well. I took it from this and I turned it into this. Most likely I will still be sanding this down with a very high grit sandpaper, and then I will probably put on another coat after that. But all in all, if I can get the whole organ case to look anything like this, I would call that a success. So all my trial and error and testing was definitely not in vain. I've learned a lot and I definitely have a better idea of how to move forward now. I will say that spraying with that spray gun is pretty terrifying. It lays down finish like its life is depending on it. But with a bit of practice, I'm sure I'll get the hang of it. It was also a little bit windy outside, so it made it even more tricky to spray. For the future, I might have to find a better spot to do my spraying, but I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So next week I'll be jumping into the rest of the case, and I'll be approaching it pretty much the same as what I did with these little pieces. Now, being that this is going to be a very tedious job, there is a possibility that I might not make a video for that. I might just go ahead and do all the stripping off camera and then come back when I'm ready to do the staining and the finish. However, if there are any of you that would like me to shoot video for all the finish removal, just drop me a message down in the comments. I'm sure I can shoot some footage of that. I'm definitely not going to shoot all of it because I'm pretty sure I could get it done a whole lot quicker if I didn't have to worry about shooting video as well. But as I said, I'm more than willing to shoot some footage if you guys would like to see it. If not, then I guess the next video you guys see will be me jumping into stain and finish. So I guess that's it. Once again, thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. If you feel it's worth it, share it with your friends. If you have anything to say or any questions, drop them in the comments below. And till next time, keep making stuff.